Hello, everybody. We are happy to be welcoming you to our first Toolbox webinar of this year. In this format, we present innovative solutions from startups and young companies that can help you master the problems and challenges of sustainable finance. This time, the webinar will be held in English, as you may have noticed by me speaking in English. But you are welcome to ask questions both live and in the chat in German if you feel more comfortable doing so. At the end of the webinar, we have scheduled time for a Q&A session, but if you already have questions within the webinar, you can ask them live by raising your virtual hand or just writing the question in the chat. The webinar will be recorded. If you don't want a question you have asked or a contribution of yours to be shared or posted online afterwards, you can just let us know and then we will cut the part out of the recording. But now I don't want to waste any more time and look forward to welcoming RepRisk today. A short introduction from my side. RepRisk is a company specializing in transparency on business conduct risks such as deforestation, human rights violations, and corruption. And it will be presented today by Funda Elif Schirmacher. She's a senior ESG account manager at RepRisk, based in the headquarters in Zurich. Funda has a master's degree in finance from the University of Amsterdam, and she primarily supports RepRisk major financial institutions and the clients in Germany. She supports diverse use cases ranging from compliance with the German Supply Chain Act, export finance to infrastructure investment due diligence, and standard responsible investment policies. Funda, thank you a lot for your willingness to present RepRisk today. I'm looking forward to your presentation. And the stage is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Lisa, and I'm very happy to be here. So welcome to everyone who joined now this live webinar, or also to everyone who will be watching the recording in the future. So yes, I'm Funda Elif Schirmacher. Funda is totally fine, and I will be hosting today's webinar in partnership with VFU. I'm very happy to be speaking about a topic that's been discussed a lot this year. I believe greenwashing, social washings are topics that are of interest to you, and this is why you joined the session, but you also might be interested in sustainability data in general, so I'd be happy to speak about those. These are all topics that I've been speaking to with our clients at events and also industry meetings, and I also want to start off with a statement that, of course, if you do have any questions, want to discuss anything afterwards, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via LinkedIn, or who you can also see your email addresses. My colleague who was actually supposed to be hosting this session unfortunately is ill, so you will only be listening to me. But at the end, as you will see now on the agenda, we will have time for Q&A so that you can also ask your questions. And so it's not going to be only me speaking, or as I mentioned, please don't hesitate to reach out afterwards as well. Very happy to support you. I also saw a few familiar faces now, or familiar names in the participants, and I'm very happy to see that. So also to our known clients, thank you for joining this webinar, and yeah, looking forward to keeping in touch as well. So what we will be looking on are the topics greenwashing, social washing, which are based on information that we derived from our data collection, so our database. And then we will be looking into RepRisk data in general, because when presenting data, you might want to know, okay, how did we derive to this conclusion or to these findings? And then giving a few words to the way forward. I will then also be happy to give you a quick demo on the platform, whereas this last section might not be recorded. So for this, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and the colleagues then personally. So I will be starting off, and at the end, I plan to have approximately 20 minutes for Q&A. So feel free to post your questions in English or in German. I also speak German, also Turkish, but I'm not so sure how many Turkish-speaking participants we have here. Feel free to post them in the chat, or then just raise your hand, and we're happy to have a discussion then in English or in German. So looking at today's dynamic business landscape, the topics environmental, social, and governance, meaning sustainability, they're not only ethical choices, but also pivotal factors that influence a company's long-term success. And I believe that's why so many companies are now focused on this topic. And whereas organizations increasingly recognize that the importance of sustainability practices, these are linked to environmental, social, and governance topics and financial materiality, and we refer to this as double materiality. By addressing this dual materiality perspective, you can fortify yourself against emerging risks, but you also have effects on fostering long-term resilience and stakeholder trust as well. And for this approach, you need a holistic understanding of sustainability, and you need to acknowledge the successes of businesses to be able to navigate through the challenging and also fun, obviously, sustainability landscape, whereas you simultaneously need to regard your financial performance as well. So companies nowadays need to be agile, whereas staying ethical, but also well positioned to be able to navigate strategically. So RepRisk is a pioneer in ESG data science, and we have been offering access to the RepRisk platform since 2007. So we have more than 16 years of data coverage. I know, and I just recently today read an article about the importance of insights and transparency to sustainability metrics and indices, and very happy that RepRisk is a pioneer in actually also publicly disclosing our methodology since November 2021, whereas the clients here on the call who we already met know that we've been answering any questions related to our methodology also from the very beginning. And when we look at the history of sustainability and the application of sustainability data, we know that there might be time constraints. So when you look at sustainability data, you might have data which is only being updated on a quarterly or even yearly basis. RepRisk will provide daily updates, and you will see in our data as well. Also, when we look at greenwashing risk, you want to have, from a reputational risk management perspective, information on this relatively quickly and timely, right? There's also the point that I mentioned on transparency. So when you look at a metric evaluation of maybe your counterparty, your investment company, whatever it may be, your supplier, you want to understand if this company has a RepRisk index of 50, what does this actually mean and how is it derived? I want to be able to explain to myself, my colleagues, my management, that's often the case, but also to maybe my counterparty how I derived to this metric. Additionally, the methodology is very important to consider, and I've heard a lot of feedback that they appreciate that you can ask questions on our methodology and you will derive answers that are meaningful to you. Also, it's important that you have access to data not only on listed companies, for example, but also unlisted companies. I know now, speaking primarily with my clients in Germany, that they tell me, look, I also have small and medium-sized companies, right? I want to have insights on them too. They may not all be publicly listed, and we're happy to be able to provide data on those as well. The last point I want to point out is the risks, but obviously, of course, also advantages, but of self-disclosure. And when explaining the methodology of RepRisk, I'm happy to dive into that topic as well. Now, looking at the topic greenwashing and sustainability, especially, these data challenges play a key role, right? Because when I look at the topic of greenwashing, social washing, we're talking about misleading communication, and things like self-disclosure might be a factor that drives this, right? So generally speaking, and to sum up my intro, the mission of RepRisk is to provide transparency on business conduct. Are companies actually walking their talk if they say that they have ambitions for deforestation, human rights, whatever it is? Are they actually being responsible? And are they driving, are they accountable for what they're doing? And through this, providing transparency on business conduct risks, we want to create a positive change also in the world. So I'm happy to work together with more than 550 clients. The largest banks, investment managers, pension funds, reinsurance, insurances are all part of RepRisk client base, primarily financial institutions, but also increasingly multinationals from across the globe who are well known, and we're happy to be supporting with our data regarding many different use cases. So let's move on to the topic of greenwashing risk. So we're very happy to have filed a report on greenwashing risk just very recently. We have analyzed already greenwashing risk data a year prior. So this is our second report on this topic, and I'm happy to go through some information that we find. There's also a report that we're happy to share with you that you can also read through, or as I mentioned, also please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we're happy to discuss these topics in a call. Maybe there's a specific sector that's most important to you, or maybe a specific company that you want us to look at together to analyze what's been going on. But what I want to do here is talk about generally the topic greenwashing and what we have analyzed. So we see over time that the topic of greenwashing has been in the focus, or that there's increasingly risk incidents that have been associated with companies. And generally speaking, greenwashing deceives consumers and stakeholders, investors, and any party, any stakeholder, any third party going into a business relationship with a company. And it's important to acknowledge that misleading communication can be a risk that you want to consider when doing your due diligence or assessing a specific company, sector, or country, region, whatever it may be, right? So stakeholders need information that go beyond policies and messaging. So as we all know, increasing annual reports focusing on sustainability topics, sustainability reports, but also regulatory driven disclosures that are being made. The question is, are companies actually walking their talk, and are they accountable for their actual on-ground impacts? And when we think about greenwashing, I want to point out that greenwashing is related to anything in environmental, right? So it mustn't necessarily only be greenhouse gas emissions, right? Because I believe that is at least what I usually think of the very first time I hear greenwashing, but it can also be other things like deforestation, animal mistreatment, biodiversity risk has been a hot topic that I've discussed a lot in the past years, right? So greenwashing can be related to environmental issues in general. But later we will see also the term social washing, which is maybe a bit less common and maybe less discussed in the past few years, but this can be related to social topics, but we'll dive into that in a bit. What you can see here in this graph is that you see the increase of greenwashing risk incidents, and we also see a difference in regions. So when we look at Europe, where we are at, right, there has been an increasing number of risk incidents over the past years. And also in US, Canada, there has been a strong increase in risk and total number of risk incidents related to this topic. So this means that we need to be increasingly aware that this risk exists, and it's great if we can identify very systematically if this is within our supply chains, our client base, our partners, stakeholders, etc. Now, not looking only at the regions, we can also do a breakdown of sectors. So we know that industrial and extractive sectors have, just because the sector is related to environments and resources, right? Environmental resources, that they have a lot, or they might have environmental impact. And we could rightly assume so that they would then maybe also have a higher greenwashing risk, because they make statements about this, because it's a topic that they are affected by increasingly. And what we see here is that there are sectors that are primarily linked to greenwashing risks. So as I pointed out, not so surprisingly, maybe to all of us, is that the oil and gas sector, a major portion of these risk incidents are linked to this sector, but also looking now in the industry where most of the participants, I believe, that have now joined this call are at, which are the banking, financial services, and also the utility sector. So these are sectors, and we can see the development. So if we look at the 100 risk incidents, we see that there is not necessarily a major shift, but there is a shift in comparison to the different sectors that we would want to be knowledgeable of, right? So we have clients that have a top-down perspective, so they maybe look at a specific country or sector level, and then within those country sectors, or maybe even both country sector combinations, they deep dive into the company level or infrastructure level. And for this knowledge is information. This is very important information to acknowledge that greenwashing risks are related here. The greenwashing risks, other examples, I mentioned greenhouse gas emissions, right? But climate change and global pollution, these are the risk incidents that we have incorporated in greenwashing now, because this is the standard terminology. So sorry for the jump. So we also can look at the EU financial and banking sector. So the risk here is on the rise. There has been, by the European Banking Authority, has been some communication on the misleading claims in the sector, and they can be driven by 3 different points. So it's maybe regarding the current approach to integrating sustainability. It can be related to the sustainability results and the real world impact that they're having with their business, with their processes, etc. And the third is also that they might have future commitments relying on medium or long-term plans. And the banks and financial services sector saw a 70% increase in the number of climate-related greenwashing incidents in the past year related to the prior. And this is a significant risk that we need to acknowledge, not only within sustainability, group communications departments, but also in other services and business lines that we have in the financial sector. So the compliance functions also are areas that need to continuously focus on mitigating the risks after identifying them, and need to see how we can adjust to be regulatory compliant, but still be compliant with any or non-misleading information. So the other topic that I mentioned and that you have maybe read in the introduction is also about the social washing risk. So social washing risk takes place when there's a company that puts them in a positive light, kind of like greenwashing, right? But the underlying sustainability dimension from environmental social governance would be more related to social issues. So on the right-hand side, you will see types of risk incidents that we cover within the RepRisk methodology. It's very wide-reaching, so typically anything that you can think of in social, right? Starting off with the major topic, also highly driven in the German market by the German Supply Chain Act, right? The topics of human rights, and also other topics that go along also with the German Supply Chain Act, but other social commitments that many companies have within their policies: forced labor, child labor, poor employment conditions, and many more, right? So on average, we see that the risk incidents, when we look at the severity of the risk incidents, in German Schweregrad, we see that they are in 12% more severe than environmental claims. And this indicates an acuteness of the risk. And whereas when both risk incidents are involved, then the risk incidents are 20% more severe than greenwashing risks alone. So this is also something that we in the business and in the industry need to look out for, and an indication of the different areas where these risk incidents or these social washing risks occur can be found here. The majority showing that they are related to human rights abuses and corporate complicity, but also poor employment conditions. And other major factors are the impacts on communities that a company or a project may have, and also occupational health and safety issues. So what I hinted at before, right, we can see here that greenwashers are more likely to also social wash. So this might be related to internal processes, governance issues, right? There can be many, many reasons for this. And there might be an indication that this is also related to selective disclosure, symbolic management, right? So when we look at the graphic here, we will see the percentage of companies linked to social washing, and companies overall, if they're linked to greenwashing already, then they are more likely to be linked to social washing as well. And this can be a statement that is relevant for not only your reputational risk management, but also business conduct risk, and therefore also financial impact on your company, right? So when we look at different types, so when we talk about social washing, I already mentioned some social issues, right? Just like occupational health and safety, we can categorize the social washing risks. For example, it can be related to selective disclosure. So we have sample risk incidents in our data set that we have, or we have examples of risk incidents from our data set that we copied here on this slide, and we will see that they are some maybe selective disclosure. So there can be discrimination in employment issue, whereas here CEO of a US talent company where they pledge something, but then there's a lot of women filing complaints regarding mistreatment and abusive behavior from managers. I think with the Me Too movement and many other communications that we also see, there's a lot that's happening, and this is something, whereas they might be communicating one thing, they might actually be doing another. And with this data that we have in place, it's really great to identify these, or be able to identify these risks. It can also be in the category empty green claims and policies. It can be a more misleading narrative and disclosure. So for example, they can market their own plan, but maybe they could be criticized for agreements on safety standards, right? Somehow not, as you would say, maybe the correct language that they chose. But it can also be in the category dubious certifications and labels. We know that certifications are relevant and they are supposed to deliver trust, but if they're linked to a social washing issue, then you might reconsider to what extent you can actually rely on these, right? And this is not what what these labels and certifications are for. Another category could be corporate political action. So here you will see a case of social discrimination where they had an animation studio was accused executives of censoring LGBTQ content and funding anti-LGBTQ legislation, but in the public image, they tried to be more diverse, for example. So it's really important that companies nowadays walk their talk, because there's data providers and information outside that can provide insights and transparency to these risks. Of course, these can be done knowingly, but also maybe unknowingly, right? So we also see with increasing regulation that's coming, even though I'm not an expert in these regulations, to be very honest, that we are trying to mitigate these risks going forward generally in the industry. So after I kind of finished now the formal presentation part of the greenwashing, social washing report and the data analysis we did, there's a bit more that I didn't cover now, but what I wanted to do is, when we like to show data, you might be interested in understanding, okay, but what is your approach? How did you derive to this data, right? For you to understand how we came to the conclusions, you want to be convinced, right, that the methodology in place is of logic to you. And we're very happy to be working with so many clients who believe in our methodology, and we can achieve our mission of driving transparency to business conduct risks and therefore a positive change. So I will be going through the methodology now and then slowly moving to other real life examples then in the platform. So we will go through a company and look at that together. And then you will also see what our database looks like in real life. And then we can actually see, I will be taking an example from an industry that you might be familiar with, but probably maybe, or perhaps not, with data that you knew in the past. So let's, before that, jump into the theory of things. So RepRisk is focused, as I pointed out, right, on sustainability topics. And the sustainability topics, as we talked about, can be related to environmental issues. social issues, but I also hinted at governance, right? So governance is also a major point. So talking about fraud, tax evasion, executive compensation issues, etc. And when I speak these terms, you might have already realized that I speak a lot about risks, right? So there's a waste management, that's a risk. There's a social discrimination risk. There's a fraud is a risk, etc. We can also look at topics, because I had mentioned the German Supply Chain Act, like supply chain issues. And when we think about compliance, we also want to see risks related to violation of national legislation. So what I'm trying to say here in a sense is that we look at sustainability topics and we look at them through a risk lens. So our data can be used for diverse risk management, due diligence, reputational risk management, supplier business conduct risks, investment policies, etc. So many different use cases that you can use the data if you're interested in looking at sustainability and sustainability risks. What we do is we have an machine learning tool in place that scans through more than 100,000 sources. These sources can be in 23 different languages. So whereas, for example, the major language of RepRisk is English, as you can maybe see in the data and maybe also we'll see in the platform in a few moments, we also cover languages like German, French, Thai, etc. So there's 23 different languages that enable us to have access to third-party sources very globally. And so therefore, if you have business partners, let's say you're an export risk insurance, or you offer export insurance, or you have a supply chain which is very international, or you invest in companies maybe in India, for example, then you want to rely on the fact that we also cover local sources and local languages. So this is what we do, and sources are not only traditionally news outlets, but they can also be anything like NGO reports, country reports, etc. So any information where we have a company, project, and a risk will be added to our database. We intentionally exclude self-reported data. So when we talk about greenwashing and social washing, which was now the major topic of the section of this webinar, it's good to know that we intentionally exclude self-reported data because this can mask risks. So we provide an outside-in perspective. When you work together with a partner, or you invest in an entity, you already have information on this company and you want to make sure, okay, if they have some commitment, let's say to greenhouse gas emissions, are they really walking their talk? Is there information on risk incidents that I need to be aware of that they might not disclose, maybe intentionally or unintentionally, right? What is enabled through the machine learning tool that we have in place that scans through more than 100,000 sources is that we can have daily updated data. So the tool enables us to have a wide range of sources that manually we would not be able to cover, right? And also the timeliness of the information. So the machine learning tool has the ability to continuously search for risk incidents and identify them. And as I have pointed out, and as we see in the graphs, right, we have been already gathering data since 2007. So when you analyze a company, a project, or even now when we analyze, for example, greenwashing risk, we can go back until 2007 and analyze this company. And this is really great also for our investment teams who want to do backtesting analysis, for example. And then major point, last but definitely not least, is something that we don't only have a machine learning tool in place, but we have more than 150 research analysts that cover these 23 languages. So a very diverse company I'm working at, and very international company with many different languages that we all cover. The ESG analysts, what they do is they review all the risk incidents and they write a summary of the risk incidents and will also provide qualitative information that you can look at. So overall, this is a brief summary. We cover a wide range of sources in many different languages, and we have a two-step approach of having machine learning and human intelligence. With this human intelligence, we ensure that we have a depth of information, you have qualitative information, and we also have an amazing quality check. We have more than 250,000 public and private companies with risk incidents. So our machine learning tool looks for risk incidents. So it identifies any document and it looks, for example, for the topic child labor. And once it identifies the topic child labor, it will then assign a company or project to it if one is mentioned, right? So we cover any entity that is associated with a sustainability issue, and it can be a listed or a non-listed company, for example. So the machine learning tool looks for a risk incident, and then it looks for a company or project. So while we celebrated this milestone now in January of 250,000 risk incidents, it's also kind of a negative sign in the sense that there's increasingly companies being associated with sustainability risks. We also cover infrastructure projects, and through our methodology, you might already realize, right, we cover all sectors, all countries, and there's many different sustainability factors that you can look at. So a total of 102. So we have the systematic and rule-based methodology, which is very transparent. I'm quickly just summarizing. We have more than 100,000 sources in 23 different languages. Here you can see the full list. I only mentioned a few as an example. And what we can also be very proud of is the research scope that we have. So depending on which policies you have in place, they can be linked to these topics. Here you can also see the governance topic, misleading communication, including greenwashing, and this can be linked to many other issues here. And now, without further ado, I'd like to move on and slowly go to examples and demo. Before that, I briefly just want to summarize. I already had hinted at some use cases that are being used. So regardless if you want to identify greenwashing issues, social washing issues, or any other sustainability risk, you can identify these risks within your investments processes, your customers, your suppliers, any relationship you have with them. You can set up specific policies in place that you have, and for this you can use our data to be able to make decisions. You can have different responsible investment strategies, procurement strategies, whatever it is you have, or compliance due diligence processes where you can use the data to really make more informed decisions. And for this, we in general have different products in place. For example, the RepRisk platform, which we will look at in a moment. I also see that now a few more participants have joined, and I'm happy to see that we also have RepRisk platform users, but also data feed recipients, which is our data in a raw format that can then integrate our data into their systems, or that use the platform to be able to look at qualitative information in more detail, meaning we have a user interface that we show and that they can use to identify risks within whatever use case that they're most interested in. So there's many different ways of identifying. You can use, for example, the RepRisk index. We also have a UN Global Compact violator flag. Within the data feed, you can also receive due diligence scores. For example, if you only want to know what is an environmental score, a social score, we have human rights violator index. Clients that use those can be a governance score. So many different sustainability scores that you can also develop or receive from us also through the data feed, but also metrics that are available in the platform. I know that there's many clients and companies committed, for example, to United Nations Global Compact, and you would want to identify if you're working together with a partner that's a potential or a violator of this. So going forward, there's a lot to do. I think this topic is of importance, and the importance will not decrease going forward. And we're very happy to be able to support this important topic of greenwashing and social washing. Here, I want to end this part of the major part of this presentation. So as I mentioned, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. This is my email address. What I will be now doing is I'm going to dive into the platform. So if someone watching the recording wants to look at the platform with us, please don't hesitate to reach out, and me or my colleagues are happy to guide you through it. But now for the live participants, let's dive into the platform together. I realize that it's very exciting for clients to actually then, or interested parties to actually see what the data looks like, right? Because we've talked about so much theory, we've seen high level analysis on country and sector level related to topics, greenwashing and social washing, but let's look at an example together in the platform. So the platform, as I mentioned, is one of the services or ways how we offer access to our data. So this is our data within a user interface. It has two major functionalities, which are the monitoring functionality and the risk research functionality. Within monitoring, I can set up like my portfolio and receive email notifications, for example. So I will be able to receive a notification once a new risk incident pops up, or if I have a list of investee companies, suppliers, business partners, whatever it may be, I can set up watch lists and look at them in a more systematic manner, look at them at the same time, sort them by metrics, etc. So this is the monitoring functionality. The functionality that I want to focus now or look at an example is the risk research functionality. So with risk research, I can essentially search the huge database that we have with more than 250,000 companies in total, though you will find more than 700,000 companies in the database. You can do research on any of these companies or any of the 70,000 projects that we have. But as we looked at the topic greenwashing, right, you can also analyze on a more high level, on a country level, sector level, or based on a specific ESG issue. If you're interested in, I'm just throwing something out, forced labor, for example, you can do an analysis on forced labor and see what kind of information we have there. So what I want to do is during this demo in our last approximately 5 to 10 minutes together, look at an example. You can also find a report on this online. So feel free also to read our use case report, but let's look into maybe points that you cannot see there. So what I did is I just typed in a name. This is a Volkswagen. Since we're here in German speaking primarily, let's look at this entity. I see that we have a wide range or numerous companies that have this name. I can also, as I mentioned, look at infrastructure projects. So for the asset class infrastructure, real assets, but also if you're talking about insurance, reinsurance, or banking and loans for a specific infrastructure project, you can also look at this. So let's stick to Volkswagen AG, Volkswagen Group from Germany. And what I will now see is a company profile page. Within this company profile page, I will see the name at the top. Above this blue line, I will primarily see quantitative information and analytics. And below this blue line, as I had mentioned, right, we don't only have machine learning, but also human analysts. They summarize a risk incident in a title, but also if necessary in a brief, meaning a small summary of the risk incident. And also you can see the sources, the date when it was derived. I will be able to analyze this company in great detail. I can click on risk incidents to really see what are the data points associated with it, etc. So as I mentioned, below we have the qualitative information, which can also be downloaded as a PDF report. But at the top, I also have quantitative information. Why I chose Volkswagen for this analysis is you can see that this company rated on a scale from 0 to 100. And since we're on a risk scale, even 5, even though it would be low, would be a low risk. But here we have even a peak RepRisk index of 57. I see that this is a company, if I am working with it, it might be risks that I would want to be made aware of. And as you know, the scandal associated, it's been a while, right? But still not to be ignored. I want to point out here, for example, that as you may remember, on September 18, 2015, the US Environmental Protection Agency accused Volkswagen, so the entity that we're looking at, is using a defeat software that made their diesel-powered vehicles appear to have lower emissions than they actually did. And because of this, the company had to recall more than 480,000 vehicles from Volkswagen and Audi. So this was back in 2015. But what I could also see if I would have had RepRisk data, and we're very happy that clients did, right? So already starting in 2013, and you can see the increase here, in March and in June, RepRisk, we identified reports of inconsistencies between the CO2 emission statistics released by Volkswagen and the actual levels of CO2 emitted by the company's vehicles. So our clients that had access to RepRisk data already see that this company above 50 according to RepRisk methodology is considered high risk, already was associated with medium to high risk back at the time. And so we're very happy that RepRisk is the only sustainability research provider that flagged this high risk exposure related to Volkswagen before actually the scandal broke, right? So Volkswagen was considered by RepRisk as early as September 2014 with a RepRisk index of 66. So what you can see here is that through our access to any third-party source in 23 different languages, and with us not only focusing on a specific set of companies, but us looking for sustainability risks and then looking if there's a company associated with it, meaning the term coverage for us essentially doesn't exist, right? We are able to identify early warning signals. We're able to check if a company is walking their talk, if there's risk incidents that you might want to be aware of when whatever due diligence, risk management, business conduct process that you have in place. So RepRisk data essentially showed a few risk incidents prior to the scandal. As I'd mentioned, in 2013, there was even already a report by the NGO International Council on Clean Transportation where this was mentioned. Then a year later, or a bit more than a year, in September 2014 as well. So there has been risk incidents indicating that there's a risk evolving. So or also an NGO report in September 2015, the Deutsche Umwelthilfe accused BMW, Daimler, Volkswagen of being responsible for tens of thousands of premature deaths caused by air pollution from toxic diesel fumes, etc. So these risk incidents have been covered. And as I mentioned, not only by news outlets, but this example was an NGO report as well, right? So this information feeds into our analysis and will make you make more informed decisions. So looking at the time, I obviously did not do a full demo of the platform. I briefly just wanted to show you what the user interface looks like, just very general. There are many different things that we can look at, including filter options, right? So there's many different things that we can focus on when we want to analyze a company using the filters and using all this information. But I still hope that it could give you maybe a small teaser to look in the platform for the current users already to maybe I showed something very briefly or mentioned a topic that that you want to be repeatedly aware of, right? So there's many different things that you can do, but I'm gonna stop here because I would be very happy to address any questions that you have. So it can be related to the platform that I just showed. Feel free to also pose your questions in German. Ich spreche auch Deutsch, werde versuchen, bestmöglich auch Fragen auf Deutsch zu beantworten, and happy to then quickly translate a summary also in English for our English-speaking listeners. So very happy to address any topics that you are interested in. I don't know if that was a hand raise or if someone wanted to react with a clap or something. That would also be great. Yeah, happy to address any questions. Thanks for the reaction, Vlad. So I would just assume that I answered the question so well that there's no question whatsoever. Now I'll give you a brief more moments. Maybe something just arises now, right? I don't want to pressure you guys.
Otherwise, if there are questions later on, you can just ask Funda via the contact information, or you can just send an email to us and then we can forward it to RepRisk. So you don't have to feel pressured to do it now.
No, I won't take it personally. I'll just think that I explained everything so well and so clear that
You did.
you don't have any questions, so that I don't disturb my mood for the day. Thank you again for the claps. It was really great to see familiar and also new faces in this meeting here today. And yeah, as Lisa mentioned, don't hesitate to reach out, a short email. We're very easy to talk to anyone at RepRisk. You can also contact us via LinkedIn, or thank you, Lisa, also for the offer to contact us via your platform, right? And thank you all so very much for being able to be part of this Sustainable Finance Toolbox. We really appreciate it. And yeah, it's great working with you and yeah, collaborating with you. And it's really a great network that you have put in place, especially for the German region. So thank you so much for all the work you do. It's amazing.
From our side, also a huge thank you, Funda, for representing it so well with a lot of interesting and relevant facts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And just for
Thanks
the
for
other
the class.
participants, quick information. In the next issue, we introduced to you ScanData. That's a company that offers a data and software platform that you can use to automatically calculate energy and insurance values. It's next week, so maybe you want to join this session as well. If not, thank you for being here, and we are happy to receive any questions later on. Have a nice day.
All the best, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, bye.